And welcome everybody to another Smart Money Circle show. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is Craig Conti, who's the CFO at Verra Mobility, ticker symbol VRRM. Craig, thank you so much for taking the time and welcome to the Smart Money Circle.
Morning. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about it.
So Craig, I always like to begin. Can you tell us your story and a little about your journey, how you got to where you are today, please?
Sure. So I grew up in upstate New York in the 1990s. And I grew up watching movies like Wall Street and stuff like that. So I kind of thought I might want to be an investment banker. I got the opportunity when I was in college. I was a finance and accounting major to work at an investment bank in London in my junior year of college. And I think it took me all of a minute and a half to realize once I got there that that was not going to be the path for me, right? Leverage finance and I didn't seem to kind of connect. So after college, I ended up signing on with General Electric. I went through their training program, the F&P program, if you're familiar with it. And I spent 4 years on their corporate audit staff. And I ended up staying with the company for 15 years. And what I learned at GE, first of all, corporate finance definitely did suit me. Over that time, I did about 10 physical moves. I've worked and lived in around 30 countries, if you can believe it, over that short amount of time. And I think what I learned there the most is I learned how to assess risk quickly, right? I learned how to make complex things simple. And I learned how to take a business at scale and kind of break it down to its most essential elements and how you can make an impact and how you can have an impact and how you can build a team. After 15 years at GE, I went to the Illinois Toolworks, ITW, another big 100-year-old plus industrial conglomerate. I spent about 4 years there. That was my first, I would say, big global CFO job. I was the CFO of the welding business there, about $1.5 billion business, did business in 50 countries. Phenomenal business. And I went on to be the VP of FP&A for the company. And then in 2018, I got the call I'd always wanted. It was the opportunity to do my first public CFO job. I did that at Century Aluminum, ticker CENX. Great company. Did that for 4 years. And I think what I learned at Century was, it was the commodity business. And the commodity business, for those who have had, I'll say for the indoctrinated, the way that this works is you make money for a quarter or two, then you lose money for the next 6 to 8 or maybe 10 quarters. And having to have an investor relations strategy, having to refinance your debt in a down cycle really taught me a lot about, how to preserve capital on your balance sheet. After 4 years in that role, I got the opportunity in the call to pick up. I was living in Chicago at the time and move here to Arizona to be the CFO of Verra Mobility. The way I think about this is the job I've always wanted. This is a great growing company. The challenge here is around capital deployment and how we can most take the capital that we've generated for growth, not only for the benefit of our customers but the benefit of our investors. I've been in the role for about 1.5 years, and I'm loving it so far, Adam.
No, it's fantastic, and congrats to your growth, because we'll get into that later, because you've been doing phenomenal for many years now, and I'm sure your path going forward is even better. So let's talk about the business at Verra Mobility. Can you let us know what you do and how the business functions, please?
Sure. Yeah. One of the first question I get when I mention the company is, what is a Verra Mobility? So Verra Mobility is a global leader in smart mobility technology that makes transportation safer, smarter, and more connected. Right? We're a portfolio company, and we go to business in 3 distinct portfolios. I'll walk you through that in a second. But let's talk about the size and scale of the company. It's an $800 million business. And we have a market cap today of about 3.5 billion. We just celebrated our 5-year anniversary of being very proud of that, publicly traded NASDAQ company. Okay. We've got about 1,600 employees and about 2,400 customers, and we do business in just over a dozen countries in the world. So that's at the top of the waves, the enterprise. Now let's talk about the businesses. So our commercial services business, we're the North American leader in toll management for fleet and rental car companies. So what that means as a consumer, if you've rented a car in the United States and you've run a toll, there's a 98% chance you've interacted with Verra Mobility. That whole tolling transaction is 100% outsourced to Verra Mobility.
Got it.
Give you a size of scale here. We do about 220 million tolls per year that we process. This is a $350 million or so business with 65% margins, a great business. And over term, this is a high single-digit organic grower. That's both in the past and the future. Mm-hmm. The second of the 3 businesses we have is the government solutions business. Mm-hmm. We're the global leader in photo enforcement technology for the whole plant. So essentially, photo enforcement technology, these are red light cameras, these are speed cameras, school bus stop arm cameras, and bus lane cameras. To give you an idea of size and scale, we process about 110,000 events per day, 365 days a year. This is our most global business. Over a dozen countries we do this for. And $350 million, 35% margin, mid-single digit organic grower over term. And our third business, and the newest addition to the Verra family, is our parking solutions business. So this is the easiest way to describe this business. I'll tell you what it's not. We don't own parking lots. That's not what we do. We do the infrastructure for the parking lot and the connected software solution. Our primary market here, we're the leader in North America in universities, right? Oh, wow. So think about a university has all of the complexity of a major city in a very condensed area. That complexity is what we love. To give you an idea of scale here, we put about $2.5 billion of commerce a year through this platform. This is a $90 million or so business with 20% margins. Again, a high single-digit organic grower over term. So if you bring that together, that's Verra Mobility. A little bit to think about. One thing I'm very proud to announce is that we were just included on the Fortune 100 fastest growing list for 2023. Very happy for that. Our CEO was actually on Mad Money last night. So if you want to learn a little bit more about a company, it's a great 90-second clip with Jim Cramer. You can learn about the company as well. Our stock's up 45% year to date. And, I'll close with the company saying the way I think about it, and it's how we talked about it. If you get a chance to look at our investor day that we did at the NASDAQ about 18 months ago, this is a great company with a bright future.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. And congrats on the earnings too, your growth. I mean, we spoke about this before the call. You've been growing every single year. I mean, back in 19, you were 20 in COVID, you were 56 cents a share, then 21, 71 cents. That's a huge jump. And then $1 to $1.10, $1.20 going forward. So you've got consistent growth. You're obviously executing very well. So congrats to you. I think you have a phenomenal story. The one thing I would want to ask you now is let's talk about some competition, some competitive advantages. What are some competitive advantages that you have that you'd like to share with the audience, please?
A few come to mind. The one over and above is customer relationships. So Verra Mobility was formed 5 years ago as a public company. Before that, we went through some other iterations, being PE backed, all the way back to the founder. The company was actually founded here in Arizona in the mid 1990s. We've had customers that have been with us since the mid 1990s, and they're some of our biggest customers. Nice. So New York City has been a customer in one form or fashion of this company for 25 years. The three big rental car companies have been customers for 10 to 15 years, even more on some of those. So number one is being close with the customer and solving problems. I think the second thing is our willingness and ability, quite frankly, to invest. And I'll use an example. So on the commercial services side of the business, I explained that we handle tolls for the rental cars. We do more than that, but over simplicity, we handle tolls for the rental cars. So if you're a rental car company, one of the things, especially in coming out of COVID in 2021, you needed to do was refleet, right? Yeah. Not a lot of people were traveling, but all of a sudden everybody wanted to travel. You didn't have enough cars. So in order to refleet, you go to the OEMs, you buy your cars, but there's a step in between buying the car from the OEM and being able to rent it to someone. You have to title and register that car. Yes. And there's 50 DMVs in the United States and 54 toll authorities. That's a lot of complexity. We were asked, and we had this business set up before, but we were asked by the RACs in antiquity to go and say, hey, can you help us solve this problem? So we did a small acquisition and stood up a business that does that on behalf of our customers. Willing to take that risk, we have the financial wherewithal to do it. And I think on the financial wherewithal, when you're going to go into a long-term relationship with Verra Mobility, you can see the financial strength and know that company's going to be there 10 years from today. And then finally, our culture. So one thing, growing up at GE, there was a relentless focus on talent, right? And I like that. I think I see that here at Verra Mobility, but I didn't see the relentless focus on culture the way I see it at Verra Mobility. And we have an engagement score here. I'm sure that's something, Adam, you've heard about at other companies. Our target, I'll just tell you, inside baseball, our target's 80%, which is a world-class number. We are right there. We are we are in the high 70s. And I think our culture and our purpose-driven agenda and the fact that people like working here creates that followership that percolates down into the customer base. So that's what I think our competitive advantages are.
I absolutely love it. I'm going to give you a business idea. If you guys ever want to run with it, by all means, please feel free. Just, let me know. The smart traffic light, whenever you're at a red light and just sitting there and there's no other cars, if you could fix that problem, I mean, to the moon. But anyway.
We'll take that under advisement. I like that. I feel your pain on that one. So thank you for that.
Send me a royalty and we'll be happy. But thank you kindly. Okay, so let's talk about risk. And you said that you learned risk early in your career, which I love. And risk is really one of the major tenets or principles that I live by, is just assessing the risk and then making a decision. So how do you handle risk, and what are some mistakes, Craig, you see with respect to risk management that people make?
Sure. So I'm going to do something I don't know if anyone's done on your show before. I'm actually going to show you something. Right, it's a little show and tell. So there's only one slide I keep, and I have it on my conference table, but I brought it to my desk for this discussion. It's the only slide I keep on print. I saw this in a presentation, and there's very few words. I have nothing to read there. I saw this in a presentation, a Six Sigma presentation. You ever seen this one, Adam?
No, I have not. And you're the first person to do a show and tell, by the way. So congrats on that.
Great. I'm very happy about that. I saw this in a Six Sigma presentation in 1999, and it stuck with me, and I show it every day. So you've got a risk, right? Which here I think is what do we call it here? We call it a hazard, right? On this slide, and then you've got three pieces of cheese. So keep that in mind. That's how we think about risk. Anybody who's worked with me or for me has seen this slide going back 25 years. So here's how I think about it. I think our job as leaders is to anticipate what that red arrow is, right? What is that risk that could be coming in? Okay, that's great. Now you've done part one. Part two is you need to build those pieces of cheese, right? Nice. What are those 3 or 4 things that you're going to proactively put in place to mitigate that risk before it happens? So I'm going to give you 2 examples. Example one is, let's say you're going to launch a product, right? And the risk is you launch a product and you spend the money and nobody buys it, right? So what do you do, right? What does your market segmentation look like? Piece of cheese 1. What does your VOC look like? What does the customer's ability to pay look like? How much of your 3 launch customers have you helped burn down the cost to develop that product? You build those pieces of cheese and make sure that they're there before that risk comes at you. You're proactively mitigating that risk. Let me make it a little more maybe real.
Yeah.
What about if you're running an accounts payable department? You want to make sure you're not going to pay a fake vendor, right? 3-way match. I mean, so I use this with my accounting team all the time. You've got a 3-way match. You've got a vendor master. You've got verbal verification. So the way I think about risk and the way I think about leading risk, right, is anticipating what those red arrows are and setting up teams to put those pieces of cheese. Because if you line up the pieces of cheese, a risk is always going to get through at some point. But have you set up proactively the environment to mitigate that as much as possible? And that leads me to your second question, right? Is what do I see that kind of goes off the rails here? Number one is I think a lot of leaders confuse risk management with crisis response, right? Those are 2 completely different things. If you're thinking about crisis response while you're designing your risk management, wad it up, throw it away, start again.
Yep.
Arrow, cheese.
Yep.
Crisis response is something else. I think that's one. I think the second thing, not that it's not important, it's a separate thing, right? Correct. And I think the second thing is, and this happens, I'd like to say it happens at more earlier stages in the career, but I have seen it at the senior levels, is waiting for divine intervention, right? There's a quote I love a lot, which is deal with problems while they're small. When the red arrow gets through that last piece of cheese, be Johnson & Johnson, pull Tylenol, right? I mean, it's like you need to do that, because if you wait, there's this impact in business. And we talk about accounting, there's double entry accounting. There's you do one thing here, something happens here. In business, there's this concept that I call the boomerang, right? It will come back. It won't go away. Deal with it while it's small. But that's how I think about risk.
Wow, I love that. So we just met, and I have a book. It's called Psychological Analysis. It was #1 on Amazon for 2 straight months. And in it, I have a whole chapter dedicated to risk management because it's such an important part. I love what you said about the cheese. I have it a little bit different, but it's the same concept where figure out the worst case scenario, plan for it, mitigate it, take your steps like layered cheese, like other approaches. I love that, to make sure you can quantify the risk and then reduce the risk as much as possible, and then be prepared in the event that it happens.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to say, I don't know who did that slide. I Googled that about 15 years ago. So if anybody's watching and that's your slide, I apologize, but I've used it and it's helped a lot of people. So I did not design it.
No, it's absolutely fantastic. So, okay, let's shift the gears a little bit. What are some timeless lessons, Craig, you learned along the way that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think I think maybe about leadership, right? One thing about leadership that I've learned that I think is really, really important is that you need to be authentic, right? Authenticity is probably the most important thing with leadership. I think we've all seen leaders in the past that say one thing and kind of do another.
Right.
You need to be authentic. You need to genuinely care about your people. I think that's one thing I've learned. I think the second thing is the concept of balance. And this doesn't mean that you need to shorten your work week at all. No, one thing that I've learned that I would certainly I tell everybody is if there's an opposing point of view, this happens in a publicly traded company, it's very easy to see someone who's short your stock and go talk, run towards that opposing point of view.
Right.
Now, you may perceive it as a bit of a conspiracy theory, given your own bias, but even a conspiracy theory, there's a kernel of truth, right? So when I talk about balance, it's about diversity of opinion. Constantly expose yourself to people who have a different opinion than you do. That's where growth really comes from. You will learn and you will shape your own views based on what people tell you. If you only it's called the halo effect, right? I'm sure you're familiar with this. If you only surround yourself with people who think like you, either in your personal life or your professional life, there's no growth there. It's very comfortable, but there's no growth. Get uncomfortable. Yeah, it helps.
Yeah, I love that. I was saying most people are comfortable in the uncomfortable, but that doesn't help them grow because they're just stuck. Okay, that's fantastic. What about some timeless mistakes you've seen people make, and how do you avoid them?
Yeah, I think a couple things. The first thing is, and I'll make this since I'm a CFO, make it about finances. There's a relentless focus on hard skills. One thing, and I see this in the PE world, I see it in the banking world. Quite frankly, I see it in the corporate finance world too sometimes. Mm-hmm. What I like to tell people early on that are really, really focused on being the best modeler or the best accountant, that's important. But at a certain level, if you aspire to be a C-suite leader, those hard skills are a commodity. Yes. Everybody's got those. Take the time to figure out how to work on a team. Yes. Right. And I even say that, to my stepkids who are doing really well in high school right now. I'm like, that's great. I'm glad you're in the 99th percentile, right? Make sure you go talk to the kid that stands in the corner, because that's the relationship that's going to help you be successful because situations are going to change after. So 100%. I think that's really, really important. The second thing, so I talked about hard skills. What was the second thing I wanted to say? Job hopping. That is one. Don't do it. And we've gone through this kind of great resignation, the great rehiring, and all that. Run towards the tough market. So I'll bring it home to myself. When I was at Century Aluminum, we were for 3 of those 4 years. Some days it didn't look like the company was going to be there in 6 months, right? That's where learning happens, right? The expectations are relatively low, so you have the ability to overperform. That's where you learn the most, and then you can take those skills for when things are going well. So don't hop jobs. Don't over focus on the hard skills too much. And again, get that diversity of opinion. Go find people who think differently than you do, both inside and outside the office. It'll help you be a more well-rounded leader.
I think that's brilliant. That is really, really powerful stuff. Thank you so much, Craig, for that. That's really, really fantastic. Okay, so you touched on leadership before, but let's talk about leadership now. What are some of the best lessons you've learned about leadership, and what makes a great leader?
Sure. So I'll go back to that authenticity. People will sniff you out if you're not genuinely, and what I mean about authenticity. So let me give you an example. Lead when it's hard. Here's when it's hard. If someone on your team really makes a mistake, you own that mistake. That's not, you will never say the person on my team did this. And the reason for that is you need to create space for that person on your team to develop. Right. That makes that person stronger. It makes your team stronger. It helps the company, but it's hard.
Yes.
Right. So make sure you do that. And the second thing I would say is leaders come in all shapes and sizes. A lot of times in organizations, people will look to the C-suite and mostly the CEO. Because you are a leader on the org chart, you're the only person who could talk about leadership. Completely untrue.
Right.
I want to share a story. There was back at GE Transportation 15 years ago, there was a mid-level accounting manager, had a team of about 10 people. And I think this guy was as good of a leader as anybody who was writing books on leadership. And here's why. It was kind of a gritty industrial manufacturing plant. It was hardcore cost accounting, certainly not the things that, 15-year-olds wake up in the morning wanting to do with their lives. But he made it interesting for the 10 people on his team. Anybody on that team could do anybody else's job.
Oh, wow.
Because they all stayed, not one person turned over. And when it came time for someone to rotate off that team to somewhere else in the organization, it was a mad scramble to get that person.
Wow.
That leadership. And what I learned from that was what I think he did so well. And this is a guy you could talk to 150 finance people from GE, nobody would probably know who he was, right? But I watched him. Really, I still talk to him today because of this, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that he did is he made sure that somebody who had a very narrow job scope understood exactly how what they did mapped to that earnings page that showed up at Wall Street at the end of the quarter. And that is something I've learned, and it's something that I do with my team today, right? What's really, really important as a leader is you need to be able to connect your team's activities with the goals of the company and the performance of the company. That creates followership and it creates growth.
Yeah, that is so powerful. Almost like a purpose behind their work. It's like, hey, here's the bottom. Yeah, that is
Sure.
fantastic.
And I learned that through osmosis, Adam, right? Through watching someone else who was not the CEO or CFO of a big company.
No, that's really smart, and I love that. Okay, let's talk about some obstacles and adversity. What are some obstacles you've had to overcome or adversity and some lessons you've learned there? How do you handle them?
Sure. Early in my career, I really struggled with formal presentations. And when you're in a big company, 3 months or 4 months of work gets boiled down to that. I've mentioned the movie The Wall Street now twice in this conversation. I got to promise you that wasn't planned, but it's when Bud Fox says, life comes down to a series of a couple interactions. This is one of them. That's kind of what it was like working at GE at the time. So you do 4 months of work and you got 2 minutes with a VP. That was the 4 months in that 2 minutes. And I really did poorly. I did awful the first couple of times. It wasn't because I didn't do the work or knew that, but I couldn't get it out. So how I kind of overcame that is I used my relationships, right? I used my relationships. I went to people that were good at it. And there's a few things, even as I'm talking to you, Adam, that are still going through my mind that I learned 20 years ago, right? Which is don't say all the words on a page, pick 3 things, tell it in the form of a story so people can understand it. If they want to know, they'll ask, you've done the work, you can answer the question, right? So that was one early on. Later on, coming from a big company to a small company and now being a public company CFO, a lot of people say leadership is lonely. And I tell people that as you get promoted through an organization, the job gets lonelier and lonelier and lonelier. Boy, is that is absolutely true. Anybody who tells you it's not lying to you. And one thing is I didn't know anything about the lower right-hand corner of the balance sheet. I didn't know how to do a debt deal. At GE and ITW, the cash was always there. Our credit rating was fantastic. Our stock had been issued before the turn of the last century. So there wasn't a lot to know there. And all of a sudden, you're, 0 degrees of separation between you and a lot of investors who have invested their own capital in your company. You better understand that. So again, how do you get around that? You ask questions, you lean on your network and say, here's what I'm seeing. One thing I like to say about finance is a language, right? The concepts of finance, you've pretty much mastered the concepts you need to be a finance leader by the time you got out of high school. The rest is learning the language. Conceptually, it's not that difficult, but you need someone to decode that language for you. And all of those relationships that you built throughout your career you really leverage them at that point. And one other thing I wanted to point out, Adam, I probably should have said it earlier, but another timeless lesson, and is that your team and your peers, those are the people that determine your success. They promote you, right? It's not managing up. You got to manage out. And those relationships, what I didn't know at the time is those relationships would be the really valuable ones when I was first out there as a public CFO figuring out how to do a debt deal.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Craig. That is some really, really, really great, just wow. Okay, fantastic. Next question for you. what's the best piece of advice you'd like to give to the audience or your 30-year-old self?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do those differently. I'm going to tell my 30-year-old self, and then I think I'll do one for the audience. My 30-year-old self was move at your own pace.
Okay.
It's easy to look around and think everybody's got everything figured out. And I'll tell you, social media has made that even more. Even social media, LinkedIn, right? You go
Right.
out and say, wow, look how great everybody else is doing. What am I doing? Right.
Right.
That is one thing. Move at your own pace. It'll come. And the second thing is that and the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
It's a real thing. You will feel it. And all those folks who are great people, nothing against it, but that look like everything is going according to plan and they're 6 steps ahead all the time, they have the same thing. Everybody has that. So just get comfortable with that, right? I would tell my 30-year-old self, I don't know if my 30-year-old self would listen, but that's what I would tell my 30-year-old self. And then I think the piece of advice, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, so it's a little recency bias on this one, but I like it. It's that a big part of leadership is pattern recognition. My God, is that true? It is true, but I think it dovetails into something I said earlier, Adam, which I really believe in, is if you have a diversity of experience, whether it's different jobs in the company or talking to people with differing points, opposing points of view, either professionally or personally, you increase, this is just math now, you increase your ability to be able to spot those patterns, right? So as you lead, it's about pattern recognition and getting in front of what that oncoming item is. I really, really think that's important. That's the way I think about it every day.
Yeah, Craig, I absolutely love that. So I'm going to ask a little deeper, which I don't normally do here. What are some of those patterns? And can you give us a story or an example for the audience to help them understand? Because that pattern recognition, my goodness, is so incredibly powerful.
Sure. I mean, so macroeconomically, right? Let's just talk macroeconomically, right? You go in and say, we're in this divergence right now that it feels like the American consumer may be getting a little weaker. Let's look at credit card delinquencies. Let's just stay there. We'll look at credit card delinquencies. But at the end of the day, the economy is still screaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's coming next? You know what's coming next. At some point, there is going to be a step back, right? So that's probably one that's on the macro economy that I think about a lot. I think internally, I'm starting to see a much bigger move towards artificial intelligence that's embedded in that's actually embedded in the equipment that we sell, right? And you have to start thinking about that to say, is that a business that you want to buy or a business that you want to be in, right? There's dozens of examples like this, but I've seen that play out before. 25 years ago, here's a great example. 25 years ago at GE Plastics, there was, and the company no longer exists, so I can totally say this, there was something called DYB.com. DYB stood for Destroy Your Business, right? Okay. This was the first .com era. What if somebody can come in and say, hey, forget your expensive sales channel. You can buy the same stuff they're going to sell you at a heck of a lot cheaper, right? And the pattern recognition there was, we went through that, found out how to do it. What is the next thing that's coming at the company or at the industry? And how do you think about that using that experience that I saw 25 years ago, which was very successful?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I absolutely love that. It's almost like the green light, red light. Use that after every green light, you get a red light. So after expansion, you get the recession or pullback or whatever. And then after every red light, you get a green light. Okay, that's beautiful. Right. Craig, this has been absolutely fantastic. The ticker symbol, everybody, is VRRM, Verra Mobility. Craig, what is the best way for people to learn more about Verra and or get in touch with you?
I would love for you to go to verramobility.com under Investor Relations. Everything is there. Great place to start if you want to get a detailed understanding of the company. Is we have on video our Investor Day presentation that the leadership team and I did on stage at the NASDAQ. You can hear each of us talk about the business, talk about where we started and where we're going. And what I would leave you with is, we're 2 years into our 5-year plan of having 6 to 8% organic growth, expanding margins each year, by the way, expanding margins faster than we're expanding revenue and generating of $1.7 billion of deployable capital and doubling free cash flow per share. We're on track, and I think our best days are ahead of us.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much, Craig, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Adam. This is great. Appreciate it.